welcome to Molds Now What? I'm Jamie Meador. I've been working with molds for about, I don't know, 7-10 years, and I got working with them when I wanted to redecorate my kitchen. So I ended up creating molds for tiles, and then I just kind of got hooked. So I originally got into clay for throwing, but I really enjoy mixing the two. So sometimes I'll throw and add molded forms, or sometimes I'll just hand build. I'd say I'd probably a 75% hand builder, 25% thrower. So I found that with working with molds, I get more benefit out of them if I mark them up before I start. So I'll mark up my bats and I'll mark up my molds. So for example, here is a mold and I've bullseyed it. So I'll show you later on what I do with my bullseye molds. But what I'm going to show you now is how I mark up my bats first and how I mark up the molds. Now, you don't have to use a wheel to do this. You could use a banding wheel. It just takes a lot longer to center. So right now I have now this size mold, I really don't need this bat. But I'm just going to mark, I don't know that I'll always have this wheel, but I always will have this bat. So I'm going to mark my mold to match this bat. And so I could put it in the middle and kind of play around with it to figure out, the center, but I'm just going to measure. So I'm going to push the mold all the way over to the side so it's touching. And then I'm going to measure the difference. So I have 9.5 inches. So that means it's 4 3/4 from the edge. And that will be one edge here. And then I should go down to this other corner. And I should only have to measure 2 sides. I mean, if my mold is round, perfectly, hopefully. All right, so that should be centered. So what I'm going to do now is my other test. Yeah?
Do you find that better than just centering it?
Than just what?
Centering it on the wheel?
Yeah, I do. Well, it depends. Sometimes I don't have access to a wheel and I only have my banding wheel. And so when I have just my banding wheel, you have to use my finger and do the whole, spin it and touch it. So if I was just using a banding wheel, I would just try to center it and do this finger on it. So my finger's not coming up from the mold, so I know that it's centered. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark it. And this one I'm going to mark blue. Wait a minute, it went off a little bit. All right. So now when I want to use this mold on this bat, I will know that the blue dot matches the blue line. So you could get fancy with it and use different colors for different size molds. So that's one of the markings that will help you. All right, so the next thing I'm going to show you, throwing a foot. And we'll come back to the markings on the wheel and the markings on the plaster when we talk about templates. So I've pre-decorated this platter here. And this is one of the essential tools that I like to have is these buckets. These are dollar buckets from the dollar store. And I always, when I'm handling my platters, I always have a bucket or a rib bat on them. This is the other side. You can see I have all these different size molds. All right, so this one I didn't have a line for this size on this side, and I'm going to just show you how I would find the center here. I would figure out where my foot wants to be, and then I would do a circle and see if it jumps anywhere. That's pretty good. I'm good. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw a foot on this platter. So this is something you have to have a wheel to do. If I was only working with these platters with a banding wheel, I would be using, I'd be doing feet on it rather than a foot, but I thought it would be interesting to show this. So first thing I'm doing is I'm measuring, I'm just eyeballing it. I'm just saying it looks like a foot would look good here. And so I went around first with my tool, my wooden tool, and then I have, I like making little combs. I cut them up, and those are my scoring tools. So now I have a coil, and actually this is a slab that I cut in the width of a ruler. It's about 33 inches. And the way that I got the length that I'll need is I take a measurement of the ring. So here it's about 10 inches across. So if I did 10 times 3.14, which is pi, then that gives me about 30 inches. So I know I need 30 inches for this coil. Well, 3 times whatever the diameter is.
What kind of clay do you use?
It depends on my project, but mostly sculpture raku. So I scored the bottom of my slab strip, and I'm just painting on the slip. And then I'm going to put the slip on here too.
What clay are you using?
Sculpture raku. It's a cone 10. So now I'm just following the outline that I had for my circle. And now I need to cut it. And the way that I cut it is they're overlapped, and then I just go at an angle, a diagonal, and I cut down. And then I put my scoring on the ends, some slip. Sometimes I'll do this with the mold. So I roll the slab, I put it on the mold, and I trim it right there, and then I'll do it with the mold in place here. The only time I don't do that is in the case where I've decorated the inside. If you had a fresh decoration on a mold and then you went and you put this kind of rim on it, you would smash out, you'd have a ring around where your design was. So this is why I take off, I wait till it gets leather hard, and then I put a foot on it. But if I was going to like carve into the platter after it was leather hard, then I would just throw this ring on it right with fresh clay. All right, so that matches my ring. And then now I have to pat it down. Make sure it's on there. Oh, goodness gracious. I forgot to secure my platter. Flying platters. And very important. After all your hard work, you don't want to go flying off the wheel. All right, so what I do first is I'm pressing down just to make sure it's adhered. And then instead of with throwing, you would normally throw up. You know, you'd pull up. In the first pass, I'm pushing down. And I'm just doing that to ensure that it's really connected onto the platter.
It doesn't push the platter in the center.
Not if it's leather hard. And once again, if you're just going to do a platter that's blank on the inside, you could leave the mold on here and then do it, and then just take it off when it's leather hard. Okay, so I've made about 5 passes down, and now I can now I can start pulling up. So I'm not going to have a base this big. So I'm going to take this off. And the last thing I like to do with these rims is I like to push them over. So now I have a built-in hanging mechanism. Okay, so now that's the rim. Now I have a perfect rim on there. Well, not perfect, but good enough. So I'm still not done with this platter. The next thing that I would do to finish off, anytime you have a mold, any kind of mold work, you're going to have the rims need to be fixed or finished. They're going to be rough. So what I'll do now is I'm going to put plastic over it. Take my handy bucket, and I'm going to flip it. So even though I just threw it, the bucket is protecting my rim. Oh, I won't do that. Normally this part I would do on a banding wheel, just because it's just more comfortable for me. So there are a couple tools that I use for around softening the edge. So right now I have a straight cut edge. And what I want to do is I want to round it out for my finished edge. So what I'll do now is I'll either take a rib like this with a notch in it, or you could get a credit card with a notch in it, or you could buy this fancy tool with different edges on it, and then you can go around the edge and start working it to smooth it. So as you can see, it's really changing the edge here. All right, so I could spend a lot of time just smoothing that out, but that would be my step for finishing this edge. Any questions about throwing on the wheel? All right, so what I did now, so I just added a really wet piece to this platter, and I need to make them become one temperature or one consistency. So now I'm just going to let this sit for a day or two with plastic over it. And then I'll let it start. After probably 24 hours, then I will take it off the plastic and I'll flip it upside down and I'll just let it dry slowly with the plastic over it, but not completely covered. So right now I have it completely enclosed in plastic. All right, so the next thing I want to show you is we marked up my mold before, that one over there. This is the mold that I used. It's the same shape for the platters. And this one has a bullseye on it too. And what I'm going to do with this guy, I'm just going to use the wheel here. We're not going to turn it on. I'm just going to use it for a demonstration platform. But as you can see, I've already marked this bat up. Okay, so I made this one with a 28-inch wok, and I got it at a restaurant supply store. And then this is another wok, and I put it on the inside. So after I poured the plaster, I put the other wok in it and filled that up with water to press it down. And then that gave me a lighter. All right, so the next thing I want to do is you don't have to do just round forms on the molds. You can do all different kind of forms. So the next one I'm going to show you is, so I prepared this ahead of time. It's just a slab with so I want to do a curved tray. So this is what I want to do, is just a, so I'm not doing a bowl, I'm doing a different type of form. So what I would do here is I created just a template. This is leftover material I had. I made some lawn furniture covers, and this is leftover material from that. So what I did is I just found the center of it, and I'm going to put it on here. And I'm just going to poke a hole through it so I know where the center is. So later on I'm going to have to come back and touch up that hole. But for right now, now that I have this little hole in it, I know that I can put it over this hole here. And the other thing I did is I actually drew where the template was on here. So I have something to aim for when I'm putting the slab on it. So I find that if I do a certain platter size all the time, that I'll make the rings on the mold as well. And it doesn't matter what you put on there, it burns off in the kiln as far as markings are concerned. So now I'm just lining up my hole. So with this piece, it's not really that important. I mean, if I had a bigger piece of clay, I might want to do that to make sure I hit the design pieces that I want to. But I kind of cut it really close to the design anyway. All right, so the reason I use fabric here is it bends nicely. I also use foam. And now I'm going to cut it. Now it's important when you're cutting stuff on the plaster form is I don't use needles at all. I will use a skewer with a point. The thing is, when you use a needle, you're going to dig in and you're going to scratch your mold. And so I'm trying to avoid any kind of scratches. So I've been having a lot of fun with using templates. I have templates of all different, I mean, this is a standard rectangular, but I also have created other shapes too. Triangular and square. So the square one is kind of fun too, to drape over. So I have a square, rectangular form on here now, and I'm just kind of finishing the edges here. And I created another little template to line up with my hole. And this is going to allow me to figure out where the feet go. So I'm just going to mark the edges. And now I have the markings. Oops, I forgot one. So now I have the edges of where I want the feet to go. I'm not going to put the feet on right yet. I just wanted to show you that that is what you can do.
How do you determine where to put the feet on the bottom of the piece? Eyeball or?
I eyeball it. I figure out. Now for this guy, on this mold, I would have to make sure that it's far enough out so that it, I know this clay and I know that it keeps its shape pretty well. But if it was going to be a clay I was unsure of, I would move the feet closer to the edges because I wasn't sure how much it would flatten out when I fire it. So I just look at it aesthetically and see what looks good to me. I know that if I get it too close, it's going to be wobbly. So I don't have an exact equation for it. So what I want to show you next is a trick I learned for draping. Actually, you know what? I'm going to use the banding wheel for this. So what I'm going to show you next is actually how I made something like this. This is a doggy bowl, and it's made from a mold. And so both inside and outside pieces came from the same mold, and I just inverted one of the pieces. So I'll show you how I do that here. This is always one of the really tricky things, is when you have a really steep mold, is being able to bring the clay all the way down to the bottom. So what I'm doing is that I'm just pushing or twirling it around in a spiral, and each time I'm coming down a little bit more, and then I'm also lifting as I go. So I want to avoid any of the ruffles. All right, so when I get down to the bottom, then I do the karate chop, followed by just using my finger to make an impression, to make sure I'm fully onto the bat. Now the problem I've had with working with molds is that the edges are really hard to work with if they're the same consistency or thickness as the rest of the mold. So I mean, they're prone to cracking. So what I like to do is I like to thicken up the edges. And so what I'll do, instead of like, I could either follow my form here, or another little trick I like to do is to use just a needle tool with my finger and just follow the shape of the mold. So I'll do this for every mold, not just for round ones. Whoa. So that gave me a pretty uniform thickness there. And then what I'm going to do now is I'm going to push it back in. So I'm just using my finger to push it up and in. Okay, so what I've found is that my forms fire better if they have a thicker rim. So you don't want to get the taco bowl. And so if my rim is a little bit thicker, then it just works better. So once I've pushed it in, I'm going to take my black firm rib, and I'm going to just push it, smooth it out. So I want to have my wall not look like it flares out. So I'm going to try to make it as straight as possible. And you know, you're always going to touch up your rims when you have draped forms. And the thicker rim allows you to remove the mold easier. Just because the way that I take the molds off, I'm tipping it and hitting the rim anyways, when I go all the way to the ground like this. Okay, so that looks pretty good. And then what I'll do is I'll generally go over with a smooth rib just to get rid of my markings. All right, so if I was going to make a doggy bowl with this piece, what I would do next is just use my finger to mark where the rim would be, about 2 inches up, 1.5 inches, 2 inches up. and then I would mark it, and then I would start decorating down here. Now the reason I don't cut it yet is that when you're decorating, you're moving the clay around. It's squishing around and moving. So at this point, I would decorate it, and then after I decorated, then I would make my cut here, and I would set it aside to dry. So once dried, this is a smaller version. Once dried, you have something like this. And so this is the cut form, and I already took it off the mold. And now I have this. Now, to determine how much to take off on the mold, I would just flip it and put it over here. Or actually, not like that. And as it turns out, it's pretty close. In fact, it fits in there pretty nicely. So that's just one bowl mold. So now what I would do is I would score this here, slip it, put it there, and then put it on a slab, and then cut out the slab, and I'm done. That's a nice little cute little bowl for a pet. Yes. So I would just, yes, I have a slab. I was going to show putting on the slab, but I think that in the interest of time. So here's the slab I had created for it. So once again, I'm working with different clay moistures here. This is a wet slab down here, and this is leather hard. So I'm going to have to really score this piece. And I'd slip and score this piece, and then I would cut it. And then I would stick it under plastic for like 2 or 3 days. Completely. Not just airtight plastic, so that it all becomes the same temperature. Or, I don't know, I keep calling temperature, moisture content.
So what is the purpose of the whole slab?
Of the whole slab?
Yeah. Why would you not just let it be without the slab and use it?
Because I think that it would retain the shape better. I mean, I think having the insert keeps the shape in place, but I don't know. You don't have to. The other thing that I like to do is
knock bowls all over the place, so it's better to be.
it gives it more weight. Plus, I like having the little lip around it if I want to. Like I could do the same thing with this one here, and I did it with that bowl there. Is I did my needle tool with my finger, and I just followed it around, and I created the lip. So.
And you keep the whole surface. You don't cut part of it out.
Right. Well, the only thing, I lucked out on this mold. This one I had to cut. So what I would do here is after I cut the mold, I would stick the top underneath it, stick this over it, and then see where I needed to cut it. I would go like this around it to cut the top. But when I did it the first time, it was like, oh, well, this one, it's perfect. It doesn't need it. So I lucked out. So this is something I do. I don't know. You know, I learned this when I worked with a woman who we were doing architectural ceramics, big pieces, and she would always weight the clay down. So when I have this form right here, I know that it will never, when it shrinks, it will never crack. Like this guy here, I have to monitor it. So I know when it's the correct moisture or lack of moisture to take it out of the mold. This guy, I can just let it sit on the mold forever. It will never crack. So what I'd like to do sometimes is keep the edges down when it's drying, and these are tire weights. So I got these at Harbor Freight, and I just put them on the edges. So they're tire balancing weights. So that's just a little trick that I like to do when I'm drying things. All right, so when this is leather hard, what I will do is I pick it up and I put it at an angle. Let me get so like right here, I would have it at an angle, and I would just tap it. And I would move it around until it came out. So you dent up the rim a little bit, but because you have a thicker rim, I can use the tool like this to treat it. So I'm always going to have to finish the rim like that. Well, it's right before leather hard. It's like semi-leather hard. As an alternative to a mold, what I tried this year, I don't know if anybody ever tried this, but used a ball for your mold. So I did that this year, and I created so this is kind of a fun little alternative if you don't have the right size mold, because it's a cheap alternative to a mold, is I got a wreath, a floral wreath from Michael's, and I just put it on it, put it on a bucket, and then draped it. So that's an alternative if you don't have a mold. You just have to make sure you have to spray this down. And what's nice about using these guys is that these can help you to take the mold off. So, sorry? Did somebody say something? Oh, I sprayed it with Pam or WD-40. So these come in different sizes too. You can actually do a bigger size with a bigger mold. And I'll use these sometimes if I have molds even bigger than this, and it's not practical to lift it and flip it. So, I mean, with those bigger molds, I'll just pick it up, but, if it calls for it, I could do this and just lift it off. It's nice. So yeah, so what I'll do is I'll throw a foot on this guy. So the only thing that I would do to touch up this guy is this inside corner is not all the way, like here, it didn't press down all the way. So I'll have to go back and add clay to that and finish this edge. And then I'll have to, use that tool to smooth out this. And the other thing too is if I didn't like this big rim here, I could throw it on a banding wheel or the other wheel and then just cut, some of this length off or width.
You have to put an angle on your rim at all to keep it from drooping through fire?
For these guys, what I do is, I'm glad you asked that. So what I do when I put it on there is I reinforce it. So you saw after I draped this piece here is I pushed in and made a groove, and then I pushed the clay back into it. Well, for this piece, instead of pushing it back in, I put a coil, and then I worked the coil into the crease. So if you look at this, you'll see that it kind of comes down more. And so I find that this support will help this rim. So I created 2 spheres earlier, and they actually fell over, so I got some dents in them. But that's good, because I can show you how to fix that. So to join spheres, or these half rounds, I'm just going to slip. No. Okay, so I found a perfect bowl set, and it's called it's by Bonnie, and I got it at Lucky's. Now, not all Lucky's carry it, but I know there are 2 at the Lucky's at Meridian and Redmond. So
Are they plastic?
they're plastic.
And they're called what?
It's called Bonnie, B-O-N-N-Y, and they're red. They're a set of red mixing bowls. There's 3 bowls in them. Huh?
Would you use a metal bowl?
Would I use a metal? I have. All right, so I put these guys together. As you can see, it's not perfectly set. And then the next thing I'm going to do is find my needle tool. And this is what I call stitching. So I'm making these stitching marks in here, like zigzag, into both sides. So I mean, you could do pinch pots and things like that to get spheres, but I don't know, I prefer doing this. Okay, once I have the clay all around, I know that it's airtight. And now I'm going to have a little bit more leeway to like press in on the mold because the air is keeping it round for me, roundish. So I'm just going to take off the excess. Now it's important when you're doing this is that you do this step and then I take off the clay now. You could wait until it's softened up more. But we're going to come back to this after it's softened up. So I find it takes like 20 minutes or so. So I mean I could start working with it now, but it's not all the same moisture. This is a very fresh seam, and then this is leather hard. So I'm just going to spray the heck out of it. And then wrap it up really well. So in about 10-20 minutes I can take it out and actually form it into a perfect sphere. All right, one of the other tools that I like quite a bit is something like this. This is fancy. This is an architect's tool, and I've replaced this is where the lead would normally go for the pencil, and I've replaced it with a needle tool tip. So it's a ruler, and it lets me mark the amounts. So, sorry?
Adjustable compass.
Adjustable compass, thank you. So then I would just mark it to whatever length I would desire. And I'm going to use one of my templates just as a holder, so I want to keep this area. I'm not going to decorate it, I'm just going to decorate the outer edges. So I'm going to place this in the middle. Now if you don't have to get this fancy tool, you could use a pencil with a string. Oh, okay.
Southern lumber. Fine cone.
All right, so now what I have is this circle with this circle in it. And I'm going to take some decoration tools. I'm going to roll this in a little bit. And then I'm going to take this edge and I'm going to roll around the edges because this is a thick slab. And so now I want the edges to be a little bit thinner. And then I'm just going to add a decoration here and there. So now I've pre-decorated it. It's just it's not my best work.
Yeah, but it only took me 7 seconds.
Yeah. So now I'm going to take my bullseye, right? And I'm going to line it up with my center. And then I'm going to flip it. So this is how I do my ruffle bowls. Now I'm going to just take my rib and I'm only going to, now when I do this I'm careful not to cover up the little hole that was my center. I'm going to use that next, but I just want to get this other edge smooth, and I'm going to keep the edges flared because I want the ruffle. All right, the next thing I'm going to do is take this triangle, and it has a hole in it, and this helps me find where I'm going to put my feet. So I'll center it on here, and I'll mark where the points are. And now I have my center hole and my 3 points, and then I can use my tape to figure out where my feet should go. So like in this case, I probably want to put my foot out about 2 inches. So I'm going to make a mark at 2 inches. And I'm just following the line from the center to the dot that I made. And it's important when you do this is that you're on a level surface. So I leveled out this wheel before we started so that I know when I add my feet. Actually, this is quick feet too, sorry. So my quick feet are just, it's just a coil, and then I match the lengths. So I cut it in 3. So I have 3 lengths. And then what you want to do is you want to make sure that it's level. Cool. And with this type of bowl, it would be easy to lift off when it's leather hard. So it doesn't go all the way down, so I'm not going to be too worried about looking at it. The only thing that I'm going to have to do with this piece and the other pieces with the holes is, after a while, come back and fill in that hole. So I have an example of this. I'll pass around. This is an example of a finished bowl that I've done in this method. So I'll just pass that around if you want to look at that. As a final type of template, you could also do something with, you take regular forms like oval shapes or squares, and you create an outline for them. So something like this. One of the things we're going to do in our little lab today is we're going to take a simple form and we're going to fold it in a quarter like this, and then you can draw a design on it. Like this. And then you cut it open and you have a unique little template shape. Once you have the template shape, then you can either drape or you can push into foam the clay. So I'm going to go into a little bit about our hands-on project now. I'm going to come back to the sphere still. I think I need a few more minutes on that. So today we're going to make these little bowls. And they're just, you could either make a bowl or you can make an animal, or a bowl and just one animal. And all these are is pressed into little molds, and then I've added feet onto the bottom. So they're double, this one's double-sided textured, and this one's double-sided textures too. Or I'll pass these around. You can... So the other thing that we can do is you make a critter, and these are some of the critters, and this is all done from a single mold. And you can either do a bird or an owl. Here, I'll pass these around. So what I'm going to do is each one of you are going to get this for this lab is you're going to get a little round like this. And I have a bunch of textures up here. These are little foamy textures that I got from Michael's and Joanne's. I'm going to stick in between those. So now I have texture on both sides. Stick them on my foam. Press in. So what I did is I crunched, it looks like a little jellyfish without the tentacles. So you make these little jellyfish, and then you use the needle tool not to dig into it, but just the side piece to go around it. And then you have this little sphere. So what you're going to do is if you're done, I mean, you add the feet now if you're making a bowl. And I would add the feet before taking the form out. But if you're going to go on to making a sphere, you're going to need to make 2 of them. So you can use the same mold, and you just gently pull it out. So what I do is I pull the clay back a little bit. This is easier. Okay, there. Okay, so I have really wet clay. And it doesn't, normally it's a little bit drier. So anyways, now I have this half, and I'm going to do it again and create another half and then stick them together and do the method I showed you with a sphere. Now with these cases, because the clay is fresh, you don't need to put it under plastic like I did. You could actually just put the other one on it, do the little snagging, and then take the excess clay and work it in. All right, I'm going to go back and I'm going to attempt the sphere now so you can get started on the other projects before that. Oh yeah, this is good. So now this is this is softened up quite a bit. So now it means I can do more with it. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to roll it. On these little spheres you're going to do, if you do those, you don't have to do this piece. I mean, you can. All right, I'm just getting the clay pushed in. And then the next thing I'm going to do is to get it round is I'm just going to take a yogurt container and start going around it. So it's kind of meditative. You can just sit there and smooth. Now from these spheres you can see I made like the little critters before, but I've also done this if I'm going to make pumpkins in the fall. All right, well, anyway, I'm not gonna, I could sit here for like an hour and just do that, but that's what you do, is you use the little container.